Welcome to a podcast celebrating Scottish culture and entertainment, which is here to sing the praises of books, films, comedy, music, theatre, exhibitions, telly, poetry, and all that jazz. I'm Nicola Meehan. I'm an arts writer and broadcaster, and I'll give you the lowdown on what's coming up, what's happening now, what came before, and what we love, which is to say that every week, nearly, I'm here to give you a kick up the arts. Now, before we get wired into this episode, I am delighted to tell you that the podcast is coming to the Edinburgh Fringe this summer. It is. I'm going to be at the Stand, which is a 5-minute walk from Waverley Station, with very special guests every lunchtime from August the 18th to the 24th. So far, I can tell you that I'll be joined by Barbara Dixon on August the 20th, Grant Stott on August the 21st, and Delamitre's Justin Curry is going to be with me on August the 23rd. I would love you to join us for those. I'll be announcing other guests soon, but get your tickets for these shows in the meantime. Do it. They are on sale now. I stick a link everywhere that I can, within reason. Their chat's going to be a bit like the one you're about to hear, as they take us to a virtual party round at theirs with a choice of Scottish album, film and book, along with a chat about their life and work. Right now, though, back to an earlier live event for a Kick Up the Arts, all back to mind, promoted by the excellent Suffrex and recorded at the Glad Cafe in Glasgow. If you were here for this, thank you so much for coming along and for being such a fab audience. And you will already know that Siobhan Wilson and Ravelo played some stunning renditions of songs from my guest Michael Pedersen's chosen Scottish album. Spoiler alert, it was a classic from Garbage, so you'll hear snippets of those live versions throughout our chat, but follow Siobhan online to hear the full versions, and I'll post links to those as well. Michael is a brilliant writer and person who's a poet, an author, and a cultural rabble-rouser. He's also the Edinburgh makar and the writer-in-residence at Edinburgh University, and he took to the stage beside me rocking the greatest top I have ever seen. Picture this, a painted shirt with pink and green love hearts, orange and yellow smiling cats, and of course there was glitter. It was neon, in fact. I have never seen anything like it. Michael's published 3 poetry collections, including Oyster and The Cat Prince. His prose debut, Boyfriends, was published to huge acclaim in 2022, and his forthcoming debut novel, Muckle Flugga, is a revelation. It's stunning, it's tender, it's a beacon of hope, it is brimming with love, and it's powered by starlight. So I asked myself as Michael came on the stage, and I asked the audience what more I could ask for, and then I answered my own question. I can ask for a huge welcome from Michael Pedersen and his shirt. And his shirt. Look at it. Woo!
Thanks. You have to bring your A game with you,
It's
Nicola.
like I dreamed that shirt into being.
It's a lot of vibing. Do you know that I've started collecting them? It's one of my sort of most expensive and annoying collections, but they're these hand-painted
One of
shirts. It was a women's painting collective in Texas teamed up with this vintage clothes company, and for a few years made these individual hand-painted shirts. But each one's a one-off, and they're all sort of signed afterwards, and they went bust. You can't really find them in any shop regularly, and every now and again they pop up online. And I got this one last year, and I've been waiting for the right occasion to wear it, and it felt like when we were coming back together, it was the moment for it. There's very few colour sort of panoplies and carousels of vibrance like yourself.
Thank you.
In the arts or the human world. Oh. So I knew I needed
and they're
to
very
bring
different
the
worlds. Thank you.
Even
Thank
the
you.
machines you bring along have a rainbow effulgence to them.
So true. Even the drink, everything has to be yellow or orange. Well, thank you for that. And it is so lovely to see you. It's been a while. How are you? I literally just got blinded by the shirt, so I just went straight into like a cat. It's orange, the Cat Prince. The collar of it. Are you well, other than that?
Yeah, pretty good.
God,
all the better for being outflanked by the shirt. I've got a really nice pink garbage
I feel so
t-shirt
underdressed
underneath as well, but it wasn't cutting the mustard, but it's there.
Right,
I can maybe open a button and let Shirley peep out.
Oh,
at one point.
yes. Yeah, I forgot. I should have put that on the posters.
That was a right saucy laugh for a wee Shirley peep. I like that.
Tea time strip tease, it's the way forward. Tea time strip tease at the Glad Cafe.
Yeah.
Right?
Afternoon, even more louche.
Afternoon delight. Okay, let us move on. I went there. Let's speak about something else.
Okay.
Let's speak about you taking us into your abode, wherever that might be, for this virtual evening, afternoon, or midnight. And you're going to chat about a film that you're going to show us a bit later, a Scottish favourite, and then a book for some bedtime reading.
But let's start with the album. Obviously, we've had quite a clue as to what it might be. Your T-shirt, incidentally. I'm not trying to get you to unbutton your shirt, but your T-shirt gives us a clue as well, Michael.
Yeah.
What was the album? And also, when did you first hear this record that you're going to put on for us at our party, at yours?
So, I became a Garbage fan off the back of, a small Shakespearean adaptation of one of his works called Romeo and Juliet. It became this little art house movie. No one really saw it. There was this up-and-coming actor, Leonardo DiCaprio, in it, who looked like a sort of angel that had fallen from heaven, alongside Claire Danes. And there was a garbage track on that, Number One Crush. And it was like weird. It was obsessive. It was sort of pulling apart human emotion. And I looked up the band, and I pretty much listened to only that song for about 10 solid years.
Really?
And I've just
It's easy done.
And I've just went back to Garbage. Really, confession, I probably should have went for Absolute Garbage, the greatest hits. I am a bit of a greatest hits guy when it comes to this band. There's so many incredible ones on it, but I thought that's not what the cool musos do. They go in on an album, they go track by track, they set in a sort of seminal period. So I'm going to put my flag in the sand with Garbage 2.0.
Okay.
There's a few of my favourite songs on there, including When I Grow Up. That was like a really good starter to it. Also, it was a big moment for them. I think it was after the first album. It was the first record that Shirley said she wrote all the lyrics for.
Yeah, quite.
So you see a lot more of her. It's more autobiographical. It's like obsessive. It's compulsive. It's weird. It's a mental health album in some ways.
Quite,
She's trying to like
yes.
stabilize herself through it. There's these really sort of personal anecdotes inside it. And revisiting it was just a complete pleasure. I mean, it sold millions of copies. I think it sold over 5 million copies. It went platinum in loads of different countries. I think the title 2.0 came from the fact that there was a point in time in the 90s where there were starting to be more computers.
It's like
used.
98, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like that, yeah.
More computers started to use in recording, and they thought it would be like a quirky way to reference that. I guess they didn't know how far it was going to go in terms of technology, but it was initially starting to get recorded under the moniker Sad Alcoholic Clowns,
Yeah.
which is an edgier title. I'm not sure it would have went quite as universal. But also it was a brilliant example of advertising and branding, isn't it? That like bright, vibrant orange colour on the front of the album with Garbage across
And
it.
it's all orange. This fascinates me. It's like it's like an optical illusion. It's orange on orange again, very attractive.
Yeah.
But I'm like, how can you even see that? And it was everywhere. You know, it was on billboards. You would absolutely know straight away what this record was.
Yeah.
And it has got that thing within it as well, where, as you say, there's a lot of darkness on it. They go very deep, even electronically and things. But at the same time, there are these bursts of absolute melody. And When I Grew Up is such a case in point. Now, I remember listening to that when I was, ostensibly not that old, obviously a lot younger, and thinking, yeah, that'll be amazing. And I'm like, actually, When I Grow Up, when does that happen? Because I'm still just about clinging on to my 40s, and I still do not feel like a functioning adult. So, like, what is that age?
And I think it's the anthem for sort of not growing up expectantly, or not really adulting, as they'd say from that perspective. It's about growing up in a way that doesn't fit the mold. It's an anthem for that, and I guess in the way it's a come of age song. Plus, you get Golden Shower in the first couple of lines, which is
on the pop charts.
There's not enough of that.
No, well, in any sense, absolutely. There's also Special on it, which was another one of the big singles.
Yeah.
And one of the lovely things about that, I remember when I first heard it, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, there's a little Pretenders reference in there, because Talk of the Town is mentioned. And there's a lovely story that apparently Shirley really wanted to do it. And she phoned up Chrissie Hynde to get permission, who said yes instantly, which was wonderful. And so it went out. But she said basically she learned to sing in many ways by singing along with the Pretenders. And like, you're a performer as much as you are, you're like sort of Les Lockhead and so many poets now who the words are as alive and in the ether and on the stage as they are on the page. And I wondered about you sort of finding that voice, the way she's singing along with the Pretenders or whatever. Were there poets that you heard as much as read who inspired you?
And like Liz was a sort of crucial reference of that. She was one of the original sort of performance poets. The work carried so much weight on the page, but actually when you were in her thrall, there was like swagger to it, there was bravura to it. Like, she delivered a rendition of her own work. And of course, Jackie Kay does that now. There's so many incredible performance poets like sprouting out of Scotland in that way. But just to make a sort of mercurial jump for what you were saying about the Chrissy Hines thing, also you've got Push It on the record, right?
Yeah.
And there's 2 co-songwriting or songwriting credits that Shirley gives during that. Brian Wilson and Salt and Pepper.
Yes.
There's not too many other songs that
Name a
haven't
more
to
iconic
pay
trio.
both of them royalties. Brian Wilson for his Love Line and Salt and Pepper because it's called Push It. But I don't think there's any other song in the world that pays royalties to both like the Beach Boys and to Salt and Pepper.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's an example of Shirley's like incredible smoosh of influences.
And bringing it together, and her writing very much coming to the fore in that record. And this idea of it being called, I love these ideas of ghost titles, like what something's called before or what something is nearly called. And yeah, Sad Alcoholic Clowns. I mean, it's not even close, right? I love that it's got a completely different identity. Titles like that, like how much do you deliberate over a title, whether that's for a book or whether that's for a poem?
A lot. I've got some
Right.
shocking ghost titles.
Yeah.
When
We need some.
When Boyfriends was signed, it was called Grief Goes Pop in the Greg Hotel. It didn't stand the test of time. I had a poetry collection that was called Detonating Dandelions. All the publishers signed it, very well aware that your title's not going to get to the publishing cutting board, but you're not aware of this at the time. You just think that's a really zesty,
And they just go,
clever
that's
title.
nice, Michael. Okay, we'll see.
And then it's at the last juncture when you've not got too much time to deliberate. They give you a big compliment about how incredibly the books came together, and then say, but the title's gone. It's like, gone?
That's a beautiful way of putting it. It's just gone.
Yeah. And so
It's not up for discussion. It's
you're
away.
in both shock and acceptance very quickly. But yeah, no, I mean, I wrestle with titles quite a lot. I've definitely swirled around them. The novel's got a very weird title. And I like the idea of, I guess I'm in this beautiful position now that some of my work's been translated into other languages. Cat Prince just came out in Spanish. Boyfriends comes out in Estonian next month. So an Estonian fan in there. Very nice. That's one book sale down, please. And I sort of almost thought about something which either is untranslatable as a title, or they would just have to come up with an entirely new title, which then almost felt like the book got a new life in different places. So it does come into your mind at this stage about the international passport of the title as well. And Muckle Flugget, I don't think, has a very big international passport. It's stridently Scottish. We might get away with it in Germany as well.
Well, no doubt, dip in and dip out of Muckle Flugget. It is out in May, incidentally. So just since we're on the stage and I've got you right here in front of me, Michael, I would like you to commit right now to coming back on the podcast to talking about it at a great length closer to the time of publication.
No worries.
I mean, he was grimacing there. He was like, oh my God, yes, okay. I'll think about it.
Yeah.
But we'll no doubt touch on it a few times during this conversation. And just mentioning that title, so tell us a bit about Muckle Flugget, which is a geographic reference, of course, but do you sometimes just hit on it and go, it just has to be that? It encapsulates so much of what's within.
So that one survived the book signing to it going to print, and it's too late now. You know, they've pressed go on it, so it's going to be Muckle Flugget. Although, as I say, it was a conversation that came up with the rights team. They were like, the German and French publishers were wondering how attached you would be to the title when it comes into their territories. And I was like, no, I'm loose. But Muckle Flugget is a real island. It was formerly the most northernly inhabited island in the UK, right up in the north of Shetland. If you stand on Unst, you can stare at it. It's a sort of rocky outcrop. It's got a sibling island called Outstack. All that's really on Muckle Flugget, apart from animal life and plant life and mystery and lore, which is a lot, is a lighthouse designed by the Robert Louis Stevenson, the Stevenson Lighthouse designers. In fact, his dad and his uncle engineered this one. It was called the Impossible Lighthouse when they tried to build it. And the story revolves around the life of the lighthouse keeper of Muckle Flugget and his sort of otherworldly daydreamer of a son, who's sort of feeling the obligation to take over the lighthouse, but really is an incredible sewer and knitter and wants that to be this sort of creative form of expression. Of course, Shetland and the Fair Isle and that circle of the world is one of the world leaders of that. It's such a beautiful export industry and such a great representation of Scotland, but his father's quite a sort of testosterone-driven guy. He's pretty belittling of that. Stranger comes from afar, ensorcels him, romances him, male friendship love story, wants him to run away with the big city, and there ensues the tension. The main character does have a best friend who is a ghost from another time. It's the ghost of the writerly dandy Robert Louis Stevenson, who speaks to him solely in Stevensonian verse. I got access to the Stevenson archives at the National Library. I was reading all his letters to try and recreate this. That was loosely based on that film. Do you know Finding Eric?
Yeah.
Where this guy has Eric Cantona come to him as his life coaching confidant. And I thought, well, I'm not a big football guy, so I wouldn't. There's not a football player, although Cantona does speak in pure poetry sometimes. So
Sure.
I'd be tempted. Who would I want, or who would this character want? And it's Robert Louis Stevenson. So I brought him back. And it depends how you feel about the paranormal realm, whether you believe this is a ghost, or maybe it's a psychological manifestation of his trauma and his grief has brought him the answer to a lot of his problems.
Your connections to Robert Louis Stevenson, obviously, as a writer, and you being from Old Reekie as well, but the fact that you won the Robert Louis Stevenson Fellowship as well, and that took you on all sorts of adventures. You know, you've lived with his words and his spirit, if you like, yourself for years.
I feel a kinship to Stevenson. I won the Robert Stevenson Award, which was a beautiful thing to do. You get to go to France for a month, just outside France in Grèce-sur-Léon, where Stevenson was living with like his cousin and a group of sort of artists and bohemians who'd sort of eschewed the highfalutin pleasures of Paris to make their own colony outside of it. And he meets his wife-to-be there, Fanny Osborne, so there's not just sort of literary luster in the air, there's like genuine lust. So it was a brilliant place to spend a month and to write and to try and pretend to be a fancy spec writer and convince myself I was following the Stevenson brogue. Beyond that, Stevenson also studied at Edinburgh University. He studied law. He wanted to be a writer. His family didn't think that was a particularly noble or revered profession, so he studied law as a sort of negotiation of getting a real job and then quit it to be a writer when things started taking off. I studied law as a negotiation, as I described when I wanted to be a poet when I was younger, or a writer to my family. It was labelled a kamikaze career plan. It was a big family. No one had went to university. Me saying I wanted to be a poet didn't go down too well at that stage in the game. So I got a real job for a while to recklessly abandon it, and so I could be more like Stevenson as well. You know, it's a lot of hours to put in to make yourself similar. But
I think that's called commitment to the cause, right? Okay,
Yeah.
and here he is in spirit form in Muckle Flugga. Even on that Garbage album, right? So you come across Garbage through the Romeo and Juliet soundtrack, and then you absolutely get into this one record, and we've mentioned a couple of songs on it. But there's another incredible track on that song, The Trick Is to Keep Breathing, which of course references a Janice Galloway book, which is stunning in and of itself, right? So at what point did you realise that Shirley's from Edinburgh, okay, because they're this massive, huge international band based in the States, or that something like that is being referenced on it, you know, that there's Scottish literature embedded at the heart of this record in many ways?
Yeah, so I didn't know that Janice Galloway reference until last year in Barcelona when Shirley announced it from the stage. This is based on a Janice. So she still credits those writers a lot of the time. And she's so invested in literature. You know, she chaired a book launch for me at the Edinburgh Book Festival with Charlotte Church when Boyfriends came out. I know loads of other writers and artists that she gives her sort of support to, whether that's promotion on social media or whether that's on a personal level as well. So even though she spends most of her time in LA, she does come back to Scotland a lot, and she has such a thirst for Scottish art. She actually initially got involved with Noiriki when it was during lockdown, and we did a massive big group read through of Lanark.
That's
Obviously,
right, yeah.
not the whole book, but lots of little snippets
You'd still
of it.
be here if you'd started in a group read
That
of
is
Lanark,
true.
right?
We'd
You'd still be on book
going.
3, and that's the first one.
And I'd read online that one of her favourite writers was Alistair Gray, and she loved Lanark. So we reached out to her to ask to do a little part of that, and she was like dead chuffed to be involved. And I think it just shows how fervent she is about Scottish arts and Scottish literature. They just announced a new album, and it already sounds like a Booker Prize winning novel.
Yeah, the titles are incredible, aren't they? Just like that. And I think also she'll tap into something at the heart of what you do. So she said of Boyfriends, I love this, dazzling. Look at him getting all shy. Uncommonly romantic, irreverent, and at times laugh out loud funny. A delight. Like, what I particularly love about that is that she called it romantic, because in your poems, in Boyfriends, and absolutely in Michael Pedersen, some of the great love affairs of your entire life are friendships. And sometimes that's overlooked even now, right? Or we take them for granted, or we don't know what we've got.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that book came bearing the banner, perhaps friendships are the greatest love affairs of our lives, and that can be singularly, that can be collectively. And I think you just have to light a fuse for that. Friendships so often get pushed aside in terms of what used to be the old church ideal of, marriage and the family from that perspective. Friendships were actually seen as an encumbrance to that at a little point in time, and were deterred by the church at a certain point in time. But even still, the notion of sacrificing time from our friends away from family or away from work pursuits can be seen as a selfish indulgence, but it's not at all. It makes us better lovers, better, more intelligent human beings. It's friends arms will fall into if our heart's broken. It's friends that sometimes sustain us from an emotional perspective. Plus, you can have so many different types of friends. Yeah. You can have friends you do very particular, weird, kooky, singular things with, and other friends that you gift, every other part of your life. You can have so many obscure, misshaped, weirdo relationships within the friendship circuit that are just you. You can sort of curate your life. And I always think, I say it in the book, and I sort of stand by it. If there is this great judgment ahead at some point in life, I hope to be judged by the friendships I inhabited and the love I invested in those. And Boyfriends, in a sense, is around what would be labelled failed friendships. All of the friends I write about in there, they're no longer actively in my life. We've maybe geographically moved away. Some of them very tragically died. Others went deeper into drugs and alcohol and sort of disappeared off the radar from that perspective. But I still value so many beautiful things about our epochs together, about our moments. And I think I carry a life lesson from each of those friendships into what gives me this sort of human toolkit for making sentient relationships now. So I don't see them as failures in any degree, and I want to pay tribute to them constantly for what they are, these ephemeral, incredible creations. I don't want to carve them back into my life and pull them. They were of a time and place, and that's okay. If they come back into my life organically, great, I'll be open to that. But I think it's just okay to celebrate them for where and when they were.
And also, every single one of them, in their own way, is life-changing. Yeah. It can be brief, or it can be lifelong, but they all have such an impact. And again, that's something that very much resonates in Michael Pedersen as well. That's your debut novel.
It's my debut novel.
Absolutely stunning. I wondered what the process was like compared to writing one of your poetry collections or Boyfriends, because what strikes me is it is a novel. It's an epic, even though it's not like absolutely huge book, but I'm going to be honest, I haven't actually quite finished it, and it's out of choice because I don't want to leave that world. Yeah. I'm actually kind of deferring the gratification but the heartbreak of having to leave that world and these people. But yeah, what was that like? Because every word of it is poetry in one way, but it's a whole different world to enter into, and I guess to leave at some point.
Yeah, do you know, I've always been a wee traitor of the genres. I sort of pride myself on it. I'm the writing residence at Edinburgh Uni now, and they split the creative writing course into poetry and fiction. And, it becomes such a big part of people's identity. Hi, I'm Sabrina, I'm fiction. Hi, I'm Selena, I'm poetry. And, they lead with it. So anything...
There's a lot of Sabrinas on the course, huh?
Anything that... it is Edinburgh. Anything that I... try and get them to do, I get them to betray their genre. If you're writing in fiction, I want you to write poetry. If you're writing in poetry, I want you to write fiction, because I love that type of writing. In all of my poetry collections, there's big swathes of prose that are prose poems, but where is the boundary between poetic prose and prose poetry? Nowhere, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. You can swish between the two. In Boyfriends, I was smuggling and Trojan horsing poetry into that at every stage possible, flattening them out, hiding them in between the chapters, playing with the structure of them. So I was trying to inject poetry, and I do a live rendition of the book, and I've memorized it all, and I deliver it a lot like poetry, and then people have bought the book afterwards, and I thought this was a poetry collection, because you can move it that way. And it's the same with the novel. You know, I'm trying to work out, all these books have a sort of split soul. You know, they're bifurcated beings for me. When you tour a lot and you perform a lot, it's how it's printed in the book, and it's how I can best represent that in a live manifestation. And sometimes I'll, you know, betray it a little bit or tinker with it, or it's almost like a remix that you're hearing on stage. And this novel is, you know, it's going to be tricky, but I've already started to test run it. I just did a novel preview up in Pitlochry while I'm coming.
Who also loves you, like everybody.
At his Winter Words Festival. He's a safe pair of hands, you know, he's vivacious and exciting, and he sort of gets behind it, so he encourages the energy and the experimentation out you. So I think I've cracked how I'm going to read it. But
right, so that was a bit of an eye-opener, because that's the first time you're on stage giving a bit of an idea, because it becomes something different at that point.
Yeah, it was a dress rehearsal. Of course, sold out theatre of Alan Cumming. Great place to do it if you're going to make a few mistakes, because you know, stakes are high, and once you've made a few high stakes mistakes, then the rest of them get a bit more palatable.
Yeah, it's all right. But it's also, you know, the brevity of something, or the length of something is important either way. So it's lovely that you actually fell for Garbage, if you like, not because of an album, but because of a song that stood out to you amidst an entire soundtrack of something, but you were drawn to it.
Yeah.
But with an entire album, it's like worlds within worlds, and version 2.0 is one of those. We're going to be moving through to your home cinema or your sofa or something shortly for the movie, but is there anything else you wanted to mention about Garbage? What are your other... Because one of the things is, something like I Think I'm Paranoid, all of these songs have got this sort of dark energy, but there's something really compelling about it. Yeah,
you know, it was the opening three of that album that had me. You know, and it's the first lines in them. You're going from Temptation Waits to I Think I'm Paranoid to When I Grow Up. You know, those three songs for me are an album in themselves. As we touched upon with When I Grow Up, you've got Golden Showers and a giant juggernaut very quickly. Temptation Waits starts, I'll tell you something, I am a wolf, but I like to wear sheep's clothing. I am a bonfire, I am a vampire, I'm waiting for my moment. So they are like pretty sharp, pretty poetic. They're using every word. Shirley sort of becomes the creature of her songs, I think, when she delivers them. But I was very fickle with Garbage. You know, it was Romeo and Juliet at first that got me in, and then they do a Bond theme song as well, off the back of the popularity of this album. It's actually, they tour this album for 22 months, and I guess midway through its success, they get asked to do the Bond theme. And I think it was like a brilliant honour, but also quite a difficult thing to do. And there's this brilliant story about them being invited to the Bond premiere in LA, but they managed to miss their plane, or their plane's delayed, or something happens, so they all go to the cinema to watch it. And Bond starts up, the theme song comes on, and it's a pretty different version than the one that they've sent. They've pulled out a lot of like the Garbage production side of things, and it's pretty pared back to strings and Shirley's voice and a few other little things, and it was a very different incarnation of the song, but they got a Bond song under the belt.
They got a Bond song, but I love that at the end of the day, you hand something over. It's a bit like, how attached are you to your title? Like, how attached are you to this production? Because we've got different ideas about it.
Also, weirdly, on that tour, they end up doing a gig in Edinburgh in 1999 for the opening of the Scottish Parliament in Princes Street. And I won't do too many personal stories, but I was having dinner with Shirley and Nicola Sturgeon, and she
didn't get that invite, I don't know.
She was saying, Nicola was like, oh, the last time I saw you performance, I was 27 years old, I'd just been made an MP, and I was dancing to Garbage in Princes Street Gardens. So it was a sort of epic coming back together in that moment as well.
Because they were absolutely massive. They were everywhere. But there you go. Everyone's got their little personal connections to these songs and these films as well. So we've been at the Hi-Fi. We've been dancing around the Hi-Fi.
It's got sweaty, I imagine.
Yeah, it's pretty warm
quite a pokey
now.
flat I've got as well.
I was going to say, you're putting on a video now.
I've had to put some of the tables on the sofa, so we've got a bit of room going on there.
I wondered about that. Where are we? And also, just before we get to the movie you've chosen for us to put on, are you giving us any drinks and snacks? What are you serving up? Or not?
Oh, well, I'll ask you if you're hungry. I'm not going to put them out immediately, but I'm a big fan of tapas.
Nice.
I like to make lots of little snacky bits.
Into it.
I'll come in big.
Right, okay. Well, I'm here for the tapas.
I mean, we'll go in easy with some, good bread, cheese, hummus, picky bits.
This better happen straight after this, by the way.
To be honest, I didn't think about the snacks. I remember them from previous podcasts, but I got too carried away with the music We're about to watch a movie, so let's just stick to popcorn.
No, listen, I'm fine with that. And no one's beaten Chris Brookmar telling me he makes his own handmade guacamole. I was like, I should just stop asking now. I felt very inferior.
I know,
at that point.
this isn't dinner.
Right,
you
yeah.
know?
And also, we've got a film on also which has some scenes that, aren't necessarily particularly palatable
So
if you're eating your dinner, right?
I rewatched this film last night, eating my dinner, and one of the particularly, more difficult moments of it came on exactly when I was eating tea, which was the worst toilet in Scotland scene.
Okay.
I had made a lentil curry. I won't go into the viscous similarities there, but
thank you.
Suffice to say, they're hovering over us.
I'm never eating that again. So we're in Glasgow, obviously, we're at the Glad Cafe, but you're taking us through to Edinburgh, an Edinburgh writer, an Edinburgh film, and when did you first see Trainspotting?
So technically, most of it was actually filmed in Glasgow, in studios and a lot of the club scenes, but it is the big Edinburgh movie. So when it came out, I had heard about it. I think I was 11 or about to turn 12 when it came out. And the first I heard of it was some of my friends had watched it, and I was strictly told I was not allowed to see this movie yet. So I had to sort of cunningly and connivingly figure out a way that I could watch this so I could join in with the playground chatter about it, get some kudos. So I snuck down and I taped it on the VHS. It was on the TV, so it must have been a little bit afterwards. Had to play and record, sneak back up to my room, sort of wait till I think it was finished and creep down in the middle of the night. Eventually got hold of the movie on the VHS, waited till my mum and dad went out at one afternoon and weirdly, I was sort of suspicious that if I played it on the sort of main TV and video downstairs, it would remember it. It might just spit out some of the scenes. It was going to grass on me. So we had this really rubbishy. Remember when the TV and video in one came out?
Oh, they were great.
I begged for that for Christmas from Argos, saved up my Skittle Boy money from the Sheep's Head, where I used to work as a Skittle Boy, and bought one of these bad boys. So I watched it up there, but at a volume of 2, lying in front of the TV and video inches away. So I had a pretty close encounter first viewing experience, so I remember it pretty vividly.
Also, that's a great video to watch quietly, but you're watching every single moment, and the physicality of it's right there anyway, isn't it? I mean, the soundtrack's incredible. There were so many different aspects to the film. The book was a must-read. Irvin Welsh, of course, then Danny Boyle, and this film adaptation. The soundtrack had a massive, it was everywhere. It was like this cultural phenomenon. Yeah,
I guess linking into the garbage thing, what we said with their banner with the bright orange. The Trainspotting orange was a different type of orange.
Yeah.
But it is still used as one of the world's most successfully marketed films. You see that Trainspotting opening sequence of Choose Life. You see the poster lineup of them in the sort of shooting range of it, still replicated time and time again in the marketing world today. I think Irvin has got sort of frustrated to the nines with it, and the Choose Life thing was a sort of playful rip-off of an anti-drugs campaign at that point in time as well. So he was bowing down to it. But it just shows you the sticking power. It became such a sort of cultural phenomenon or a brand at that point in time. And obviously a lot of you will know that Irvin is in Trainspotting. He becomes Mikey Forrester in there, who sells renting the opium suppositories, bring you up gradually, that then come out into Scotland's worst toilet. Did you also know Stuart Murdoch from Belle and Sebastian was in Trainspotting?
I didn't. Tell me more.
I know this because he popped it up on his socials 2 days ago.
Oh, really? Right.
The scene in the pub where they've all just mugged the American tourist that comes in and goes, "Can I use your bathroom?" And then you just see Begbie going straight after him, and the rest follow. Stuart Murdoch's just at the bar having a pint.
Is he?
So
he's
he
like
was
an extra.
Yeah.
I love that.
I'm not sure it's the most seminal thing he's done in his career, but he shared it with the world the other day, so I'm sharing it with you.
He's impressed enough. I wonder about the Edinburgh that you're growing up in, you're seeing as a kid. So you're in Portobello, right?
Yeah.
But because so often Glasgow is mythologized, and absolutely rightly so, for its music, for its culture, for its writers. We're going to end up coming back here because of your bedtime reading. But at that point in Edinburgh, and you've got Garbage, and a bit later on, Young Fathers, who are huge, and they've got a connection to your love of them from being Edinburgh, and also soundtracking T2, Trainspotting 2.
The heartbeat of Trainspotting 2.
But even seeing your streets at the heart of this international movement of Trainspotting, as it was, must have been wild for for a kid. There wasn't anything like that in Stirling, right? We've not had that film yet.
Yeah.
Braveheart didn't do it.
Yeah. No, I guess it was such a precise Edinburgh vernacular. You talked like that. You knew someone who claimed to be every single one of those characters in the book. That's my uncle. That's my second cousin. I mean, I've spent a lot of time with Irvin, and the number of times he gets stopped by someone to tell them that character is that person in his family, and sort of categorically denies it's any of them. Also, a wee connection. Ewan Bremner went to my high school.
Did he?
He was one of the big alumni, Portobello High School.
And did you know that when you were at school? Because these things do have a big impact.
Oh
it
yeah,
makes
no,
something
it
feel
was talked
possible,
about
right?
there. Also, Gail Porter. So Ewan Bremner and Gail Porter were
the
out there.
90s, 90s massive icons, right?
We weren't an academically high achieving school in terms of the prowess, but we had a lot of actors, sports stars. Gail Porter, Phil Cunningham.
Oh wow!
Back.
Right, okay.
Siren the Gladiator. That's like third season.
You're crossing all the. You're crossing. That's
But
running the gamut there.
Ewan Bremner was the big
celebrity.
one. He was the big one. He went into, so it was well known that he'd went to the school. So it gave us a little bit of like arts kudos. We were one of the train spotting schools from that perspective. But also from a Scots language perspective, you weren't aware of it, but you were getting sort of the Scots corrected out of you a lot in the classroom, and then all of a sudden the biggest book in the English language in the world at that point in time was in contemporary vernacular Scots, and it was such a stamp. And it was a sort of gateway drug to then realise that there were other writers writing like this, whether it was Alistair Gray or James Kelman or Liz Lockhead. There were other writers using the Scots vernacular and were, enthralling audiences, not just in Scotland, but the world over.
Absolutely. Were you aware of them when you were at school? Were you always drawn to words? Did you always have this sense that in some way this is what, you would be doing or you would want to be doing?
Yeah, definitely. I started writing poetry quite young. I used to write poetry and hide it in my golf bag. I had this like effulgent, luminous coloured notepad that I'd hide it. I didn't play golf. So it seemed, and my dad was a big golfer, really wanted me to play golf. So it seemed like a safe place to put it. And my friends knew it was there and they hunted it down like demons until they eventually found it. And absolutely tore me to shreds when they found it. One of my friends every time still mentions this poem called Boy in the Corner. It's as angsty as it sounds, and has heckled for it at gigs, in fact, as well. But once they discovered it, and once I was mocked about it, and once it was there, it was like, okay, I've fessed up to this, whether I like it or not. And then I started to take enjoyment out of it. Then I started to write it on my own terms. I published poems in the school magazine because I was going to get the ripping anyway, so I might as well get some of the boons and the benefits of it. And then the fact that I wrote poetry was all of a sudden just old news. Plus, I started writing in Scots. The high school magazine was called the Porty Blethers. And I used a Scots dictionary to write almost like Burnsian in Scots. That way, if people picked it up to give me a ribbon, they'd have to really work for it. And if they did work for it, fair play.
Respect is due.
So yeah, always wanted to do it, always wrote, always knew that's what I wanted to get into from that perspective. And it was just finding a time where I could convince others it was a good idea.
Yeah, and reading people like Irvin Welsh and he being a gateway to Alistair Gray or Liz Lockhead was a key part of going, I can do this on my terms, I can write it in my language.
Yeah, I think so. And it took me a while I had to sort of come back to that. I started reading like Huxley and Orwell and a lot of the like dystopian, utopia novels. I loved a lot of the dramatic I loved Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes and Seamus Heaney. So I came back to Scottish literature afterwards. And I mean, Irvin did the same. I think he wrote a pure sort of BBC English language version of Trainspotting and just felt it was so inauthentic. And even though he was warned that if he wrote in Scots vernacular, the sales would plummet, he took that risk anyway and invested in the authenticity of the book. And, it turns out it did okay.
Yeah, it seemed to have done okay. Yeah, a few of us have heard of it. Irvin has been one of your guests in the incredible events that you engage people with as part of your tenure as a writer in residence at the University of Edinburgh. When you, is it this the second year? I can't remember.
Second year.
I'm thinking because I spoke to you when you took it on. I'm like, was that was a while ago, right?
I finished in August.
Wow.
So it's a 2-year thing. It's for the writing residence Edinburgh University. It's academia with small a. Goes all the way back to like the late 60s. Sorley MacLean, the Gaelic poet, was the first ever writing residence. Then Norman McCaig. And then in more recent years, it's been Liz Lockhead, Alan Warner, Jenny Fagan. So there's been this beautiful run of writers, but you only really ever have it 2 years. And you're supposed to get people excited about literature university-wide. It's not all for the creative writing students. And I took that seriously. You know, Edinburgh, as a university, wasn't built like Oxbridge to keep people out. It was built to be this dialogue, this narration with the city. And I feel like we've pulled away from that. So all of the large-scale events I did them uncompromisingly, that they were in the biggest venues. They were all free. I was going to blast the budget on big names. We had Irvin Welsh, Jackie Kay, Alan Cummins, Sarah Pascoe, Nicola Sturgeon, Val McDermott, Holly McNish, incredible people. We've got 2 next month, one with Fern Brady, one with Simon Armitage.
Brilliant.
So I wanted to open it up and to make this a celebration of literature and words and cultural figures, but I wanted the public to be in as much as possible as well. So that was my sort of antagonistic way into it.
But that seems to me to be your ethos for so much of what you do. And I wonder now, as Edinburgh Makar, if that same spirit and that same energy and that same approach to this being for everyone is what you're carrying through that as well.
Yeah, you know, the Edinburgh Makar position's even looser in that respect. You just have to be seen to be celebrating poetry in the city to a certain extent. And I felt I was doing that anyway. And I tend to look at that not by what it says on the contract for the job, but actually what you end up doing. And the last few things I've done was I just wrote a new poem for the Samaritans. They've launched a new tartan called Samara Tartan.
Oh, come on. I mean,
I
that's
was on board from this email title. That's just supposed to raise awareness for reaching out from that perspective. So I wrote a poem to front that campaign. Edinburgh's just turned 900 as a city and 20 as a UNESCO City of Literature, so I was writing something sort of celebrating that, but really wanted to antagonise the city as well about what we could do better looking forward. And I'm doing a big thing for Independent Bookshop Week about celebrating independent bookshops. So I look at what I do. You get loads of approaches and I choose ones that feel personal.
That idea of being a makar is going to lead us on to, it's a Scots makar and a Glasgow laureate for the bedtime reading. Are you ready to move us on to the bedtime reading?
Do you know, I had this sort of TED talk prepared on train spotting about how really...
I know he has facts, that's why I have to prime him before we move on to the next thing. Actually, not just any clipboard either. I've got mine orange. I think everyone needs to see your incredible look. A red clipboard with Michael's name in gold.
I'll be honest,
glitter.
the clipboard's got better responses than that in the past. I considered that quite tepid.
Shall we try again? Look at the clipboard.
Thank you, that was needy. I appreciate it. I had this TED talk prepared.
Right.
About how Trainspotting's actually a male friendship love story. You know, it's about disillusioned youths, about drugs, about, you know, all of that. But really it's a male friendship love story going back to Aristotle's 3 levels of friendship. Friendships of utility, which is the thing where we sort of do favours for each other or depend upon each other. Got a big argument about how that's Begbie and Renton. Goes down to London, seeks refuge. It's safer to be friends with Begbie than not. I mean, he's doing you a favour by not stabbing you. Then there's friendships of pleasure, which is Sick Boy. You know, they do drugs together, they chase girls together, but really there's a hostility between them. They're not great friends out of these pleasurable activities. Then there's the friendships of virtue, that which can make you a better person. You are genuinely invested in each other's emotional development, and that's him and Spud. To be honest, that would have went on for 10 minutes and it sounded much better in a 1 minute intro.
I'm loving that, so boyfriends.
I'm glad we went.
I think he needs a cheer though, because I mean thank you for coming to Michael's TED Talk. Didn't know we were getting one of them. Woo! Okay. Well, let's elaborate on that at a later date.
I did a big conversation on friendship with Val McDermott as well, and I'd prepared the TED Talk for that, and then forgot to do it until the end.
This is what happens,
It's never
right?
going to be done. To be honest, I mentioned it to Irvin once, and I was like, "How does that sound?" He was like, "Oh, up to you." So,
is that what you said on it?
Yeah, it wasn't a fervent response. He didn't endorse it.
I love that you're sticking by it, right? One of these days, at one of these events, that's going to be the thing.
Yeah, you just need writers to die, and then you can say anything you want about them.
Oh, that's lovely.
They're not there to contradict you. I'm not willing on his death. He's a very healthy man.
A very healthy, virile man.
I want more books, more films, but, you know.
Okay, and then your theory will bear more weight. All right. So yes, we're going to move through to wherever you're letting us. I don't know. Is it a camp bed? Maybe you can maybe stay over at yours.
It's just one room. It's basic. We can move
Perfect.
around seats a little bit.
Okay.
There's an armchair. There's a sofa.
Get a little blanket.
There's
hot
one of
water
those,
bottle.
like, Gaudi looking 80s electric fires. Looks like might blow up at any minute, but you know.
I like the element of danger. I like that risk. And you're going to hand us over a book. And yes, you're the Edinburgh makar. This incredible man was the Glasgow's Poet Laureate and the Scots makar.
Appointed Glasgow's Poet Laureate in 1999. Glasgow's makar, and then became the first Scottish makar, modern interpretation, reprisal of the role, and it's Edwin Morgan.
And we've got more kind of orangey vibes, right? I'm loving the colour scheme for your choices is right up my street.
So also, it can be a bit more niche to choose a poetry book than one of the sort of great Scottish novels. So I thought I would choose something that was quite slimline and could maybe entice in the reluctant poetry reader. And that's pretty slim. You know, you could fit that, and it's a genuine pocket book. It was published by Polygon Berlin as a series of 5 to celebrate the centenary of Edwin Morgan being born. So Edwin Morgan 100, and all these great writers did little intros about how much Edwin Morgan meant to them. Ali Smith did one, Liz Lockhead did one, Michael Rosen, and another writer whose book I was sort of wrestling between choosing, which was Jackie Kay's Mayday. But instead went for Edwin Morgan Love because Jackie Kay does the intro to this and talks about how crucial Edwin Morgan was to her. And he's the sort of patron saint of love poetry. I get asked, I'm sure anyone that writes poetry gets asked loads for poems to read at weddings, anniversaries, even funerals. I'm much more popular at funerals, it seems. But I always try and recommend love poems to be reading at funerals, because what is grief but the final manifestation of our love? You know, all these reverberations we've got for someone, but they're not there for us to put into, so we reconfigure those into something galvanizing, something of purpose. And I always recommend Edwin Morgan love poems. The first poetry workshop I ever taught was on Edwin Morgan.
Really?
I didn't really feel capable of building one from scratch. It was a long time ago, but I felt he had a poem for every occasion and on every subject. You know, he's the Poet Laureate of concrete poetry. He writes poetry brilliantly that comes out of animals. Lots of people know the Loch Ness Monster song, Siesta of the Hungarian Snake. You know, there's a sound element to everything he does, and he just knocks it out the park with love poetry and Scottish poetry.
And I think also within his love poetry, it is every incarnation of love, and it encapsulates everything from strawberries and cigarettes to absence.
Yeah, and you know, Edwin Morgan was writing from a very different perspective of love, because he was half in and half out.
Yeah.
He was, in a way, the living manifestation of a balcony. He loved balconies. He wrote about balconies. Yeah. He recorded a lot of his big-hitting, significant interviews on his own balcony, because he didn't come out as gay till he was 70 years old. Yeah. And there was people who cherished him and known him all his life who didn't know through that. So he's writing about... The
context of that's frightening when you think of it as well, because, you know, homosexuality is not even decriminalised in Scotland until 1980. Yeah. So when you go back to these poems and the fact that they are so contained with this love and this coding, if you like, just gives them such a charge.
I think you read them so differently. And one of, Second Life was one of Edwin's more famous titles of books. And I think there is a second life in each of these poems when you realise the life he'd lived and the love that he was fighting for and everything. And if you think about a legacy with a writer, Edwin Morgan in the poetry world left an incredible legacy. When he died, he left £1 million to support independence, and he left £1 million to set up the Edwin Morgan Poetry Trust. And that goes every 2 years. Part of it, they do loads of brilliant stuff, including the Second Life Awards, but the main one, I guess, is the Edwin Morgan Poetry Award. It's given out every 2 years to a writer under 30 working towards their first book, and it's 20 grand. Now, if you get, which is a load of money in the poetry world, and it's the biggest literary award in Scotland at that level. In fact, you get more for it than if you win your category in Scottish Book of the Year at the Saltire Awards and the overall Book of the Year. And I think it's just so Edwin Morgan that the biggest award is for an unpublished writer under 30. It's for an unpublished young'un is the biggest award you can get in literature in Scotland because of him.
And placing that value on it, right? Yeah. The value of those voices.
Yeah.
It's so, so important. But yeah, these are love poems in all of their incarnations, young, troubled love, as I say, absences, unspoken. There's a lot of that as well. But they follow him throughout his life. And one of the things that's absolutely wonderful about his story is that I think he's diagnosed with cancer as he approaches 80. And he's told he can either have, the doctor says you've got within 6 months to 6 years to live, and he says, I'll take 6 years, please. And he lives for 10.
Yeah.
But he has this whole new lease of life, and he has this whole new love, fascination that comes out at that point. So it's this wonderful, enduring love affair with love throughout his entire existence and beyond it.
And I think he teaches us all poems are love poems to a certain extent, because there's the expected long-term romantic typical love poem, and then there's atypical love poem. There's love poems to our pets, to lost opportunities. There's love poems to self-love, odes to masturbation. There's all this whole sort of carousel of love poetry. And even some of the most finicky and unusual topics, they've been written out of, if not a loving obsession with that topic. You decided silence on the matter would not suffice, and you wanted to say anything, and the words have been lovingly crafted as well. So I've yet to come across a poem that's not a love poem.
Yeah, okay, I'm with you. Let's say we're dozing off a little bit, and you think, just drop the book, but, it'd be nice to hear those poems. Are there any in particular that you might give us for some bedtime reading?
I think
in
so,
this
yeah.
Edwin Morgan.
They're all
poems.
punchy as well. That's the beautiful thing about these. They're all
I think that's why when you're a kid, I remember they would be up on, I can see Linda's there, you remember as well, we were at school together, and hello, by the way. You would, I'm sure we weren't alone, the poems would be up as posters in your English class, Strawberries among them. Yeah. And so they were just so visible and accessible, not impenetrable, and relatively short, right? And all of those things are really helpful. But of course, within that, there are like worlds.
Yeah, and I think,
possibility.
If all you did with Edwin Morgan is read Strawberries, One Cigarette, and When You Go, I think they are 3 love poems that could, carry you through life, that you could just keep returning to. So I'll read When You Go, because it closes the book. When you go, if you go, and I should want to die, there's nothing I'd be saved by more than the time you fell asleep in my arms, in a trust so gentle, I let the darkening room drink up the evening, till rest, or the new rain lightly roused you awake. I asked if you heard the rain in your dream, and half dreaming still, you only said, I love you.
Oh, I love that that's the final words in that lovely collection as well, right? Every line of it as well.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Every one of those poems. So if anyone asks you for a love poem for a wedding or anniversary, get this wee guy, hand it over, churn it out.
It's a perfect book. It's a perfect collection. When you read it as well, I mean, his poems were so visual.
Yeah.
But they're really musical as well. And he worked with Tommy Smith, the great Edinburgh jazz visionary, Wester Hales' finest saxophonist. And that's such a lovely thing that, now it's become, if you like, brilliantly more prevalent, thanks to people like, I don't know how many times I saw you and Scott Hutchison doing your brilliant sort of like rock and roll poetry double act on stage at music festivals, and Liz Lockhead's done similar with the Hazy Janes and Steve Ketley, but Edwin Morgan's right up there as well, working with Tommy Smith and bringing the musicality of the poetry, but the poetry of these instruments into this other entire entity. Yeah,
I think so. He was a genuine sort of star, not just of the literary world, but out there in Scottish culture. And there was this brilliant time at Glasgow Uni where I think James Kelman, Alistair Gray, Liz Lockhead, and Edward Morgan were all teaching at the university. Don't get me wrong.
Can you even imagine?
Wildly chaotic. And I'm not sure. I think Edwin lasted the longest. A lot of them were sort of a bit more in and out. But there would have been some students that went to the uni at that time that would have got taught off all of them.
Wild. I mean, that would be...
That would be pretty good, yeah. Norman McCaig was like a primary school teacher in Edinburgh for a while as well, and loads of people that have came along to my readings got him as a primary school teacher. It's like, that's lucking out from that.
I'd have been so much like at parents' night sidling in, do you know what I mean? Just like, oh my God, do you know who that is?
But primary school, I probably would have regretted it if I had him, because I wouldn't have listened, I wouldn't have been into poetry. Might have been a bit, so I might have pissed myself in the class, I had quite a weak bladder till the later years, and then that would have been my McCaig connection. So to be honest, I'm glad that I discovered him later.
Well, I'm glad that we've been through
Small
a few
segue
toilet-related, incidents
Safe.
within. Okay, well, Michael Pedersen, honestly, thank you so much.
Thanks, Nicola.
I think we need louder cheers than that. And thank you so much as well.
The glorious writer Michael Pedersen chatting to me live at Glasgow's Glad Cafe. Thank you so much again to the Glad, what a venue, and to Richie Dempsey. Thanks to Suffrex for organising a brilliant event, as they always do. Thanks to Siobhan Wilson and Ravelo for their sublime renditions of those garbage songs. Post links to them online. And thanks again to you if you came along, or indeed if you've listened to this right now. Michael's novel Muckle Flugga is out in May, and honestly, it's going to floor you. If you fancy hearing more from one of his excellent heroes, the mighty Liz Lochhead, there's a Kick Up the Arts episode for that. Her chat is terrific as always. And Michael's predecessor as Edinburgh Makar, the righteous Hannah Lavery, was the first ever podcast guest in cahoots with Chitra Ramaswamy last year. If you didn't hear that, I would love you to listen. And of course, I would love you to come to a Kick Up the Arts at the Edinburgh Fringe. Huge thanks to The Stand for inviting me along. Come and join me and Barbara Dixon and Justin Curry and Grant Stott. And I'll announce some other guests very soon. Summertime in August. That's your lunchtime sorted. I'll put links literally everywhere. That's a promise. Hopefully see you there.